And we are live with our 28th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson, or at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey, everybody. Welcome once again.
Tonight we are joined by Astha Singhal, who is, so she's the engineering manager of application security at Netflix. She is a co-organizer of OWASP AppSec USA, co-organizer of the OWASP Bay Area OWASP chapter. Sorry, I'm getting all tongue-tied. Has worked at iSec, Salesforce, Netflix. Her background's amazing. So we're going to cover that tonight. We're going to get to know Astha and find out, her origin story and all that. But Astha, say hi to everyone.
Hi, everyone. This is Astha. Excited to be here.
We're definitely excited to have you. Seth, before we get into it, was there anything we needed to mention? Anything coming up? Anything that we needed to talk about?
I don't think so. Right. We'll get to the locations that will be here shortly or after the end of the podcast. I did want to say hello to Astha. Astha and I have run circles around each other for a few years. We were talking before the podcast started about, we know each other, but I don't think we've actually ever formally met. So, virtually meeting one more time is always a good thing. But yeah, Ken, I don't think there's anything else that's that we need to mention here at the beginning of the podcast. We'll get into it as we wrap things up today.
Cool. And as always, feel free to send your questions to absoluteappsec@gmail.com or hit us up in the Slack channel if you don't know how to get to it. It's absoluteappsec.com, and there's an invite link. And then you can just, of course, ask questions in the YouTube live chat. So with all that information out there, let's get right into it. So Astha, obviously I gave a little bit of your background, but we'd like to really expand, find out more and find out like how you got into this field, what brought you to iSec, because that was really interesting. That I believe that you did that appeared to be where it started for you, but maybe even further back, if you could let folks know like just how you got into security, what made you want to do that, all those types of things.
Yeah, definitely. So currently I lead application security here at Netflix, which is a lot of fun. But for me, I think the first time I even thought about having a career in security was while I was getting my undergraduate degree in computer science. And then I took class just because it sounded interesting. It was like Introduction to Security Protocols. And then it was really as basic as Alice wants to talk to Bob and they want to be able to do it securely and make it happen. And it's really kind of just the fundamental like protocol stuff around like understanding secure communication and all of that sort of stuff. And you got to both build and break protocols in that class. And to me, that was just amazing because I was like, oh my God, like I can't believe like this could be a thing you could do in your life for a career sort of thing. And then I ended up doing a lot of research with my professor in that field as my BTech thesis. And after that, I kind of realized that I liked building things, but I liked this a lot better. So I ended up applying for a master's program in security at Carnegie Mellon. And that's kind of how I moved to here from India and didn't really like look back since then in terms of the field of security. In school, I definitely learned a bunch of different things in terms of, like network analysis or web security or, more like protocol stuff and everything. But for me, during my internship at iSec, like the web security stuff was the most interesting to me and decided to sort of end up in that space after I graduated.
That's impressive. I mean, that is incredibly impressive. And so going back to it, so you were saying that and I did notice you've done quite a bit of product security. So, which I think kind of ties into what you said there when you said, you like to build as well as break. So on the product security side, was that sort of your outlet for like, I want to build security related functionality and that allowed you to kind of go there and do that or?
Yeah, I think one of the things I really enjoyed sort of the consulting experience working at iSec Partners because, I was getting to work with all of these really, really smart security engineers that were breaking all of these products all over the place. Really any thing that you can think of in the Bay Area, you got to work on those projects. But really the thing that I didn't like was you would hand over a report and be like, all right, see you later. And then a lot of times I'd see, you go back to the same project and then the first thing you do is you go back and try all of the things you found last time. And that just didn't seem like a way to, move the needle forward on actually, building better products and building more secure products. And that's why I decided to go in like a more embedded, your job is to actually help someone learn how to do this right and make better products that are secure by default or are thinking about security while they're being built. And then in that case, you're not just the throw it over the fence person, but actually get to be a part of that process. And really like one of the most rewarding things for me early on used to be the fact that it's like when a developer would sort of have the aha moment of, oh my god, that seems like it shouldn't be okay, and then they would like reach out to us and be like, I'm working on this thing, like that doesn't seem right. So, when you can get someone to actually get to that point and think about security, that I just really liked that.
That's an interesting point.
That.
I mean, yeah. And I mean, the fact that you've made that kind of jump from the security consulting space back into product security, we've had a discussion a couple of times about how the industry has evolved, but I definitely remember the same feelings that you had, right? Or that like I had similar feelings at Fishnet, right? Those year-to-year assessments that we would do, that the first thing that you would pull up was the report from the previous year, and you'd go test and find out that 80% of them were still a problem, right? So it was, it was very much all right, this is definitely a compliance check that the companies are looking at, not necessarily a security activity, I guess, is the only way that I could say it. But we've also all kind of evolved since then, right? Ken's at GitHub on the product security side. You're at Netflix now, obviously, on the product security side. It is definitely kind of a more rewarding fill for someone that's been in development in the past. But sorry, Ken, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, actually, are you on product security? I mean, I'm not sure how much your team does for. I have no idea.
Yeah, I think different people use the term product security differently. So I think definitely doing security services for the Netflix product is a part of our charter, but we're not actually like building the security features for the product itself. We're helping secure the product. We're helping secure other applications that Netflix uses to run its business. And then the same is true for like my role at Salesforce as well, where it's like I work pretty closely with, say, the CRM product teams that are trying to build a CRM product and like provide security guidance along the way to help them, in the design phase or in, kind of like when they're actually writing the code or like testing at the end of the thing. So you're definitely still doing like application security work, but it's definitely a lot more sort of embedded with the product team you're supporting. So I guess maybe what you're thinking of when you're saying product security is actually writing security features for the product. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that's my interpretation. Like, so for instance, Neil, who had shared the same set, so Neil was on the podcast, and we had talked about him before we started the podcast. So he was on before. He works on the product security side at GitHub, and he had the same sentiment. Like, he got tired of doing these assessments over and over again. And it's funny because Seth and I worked at Fishnet when Neil passed through there for a couple months.
And it was honestly like maybe 2 months that he lasted, and he's like, nah, I don't want to do this, and then jumped back to a company, to an embedded team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was for the same exact reason. Yeah. And now he, like for instance, he wrote secure headers, which is a gem that you can include in Rails that does like basically secure headers. But I know that's obvious, right? But CSP, he spent a lot of time on CSP, which is like, when you talked about moving the needle, it made me think of that because Jim Manico, who we had on last week, we got into like how XSS is just this thing that just never goes away. And, we kind of talked a little bit about how CSP though helps to mitigate that a bit, since, even if it's introduced, you have some protection there. I don't know where I was going with that, but the whole point is that when Neil decided to jump off from doing that and to move the needle, that was something he focused a lot of his time on. And I think we're all better for it. There are definitely enough people using secure headers to make it worthwhile. So
yeah, in general, I think that's definitely something we think about a lot. Like that's one of the things I really like about the way we approach security here currently at my current job, is that it's really not just about like finding the vulnerabilities. It's also about kind of like, oh, how can I make this more and more transparent to someone? Like if they're using, say, like the paved road, which some of our peer teams are building, sort of the security paved road or the infrastructure paved road is sort of this concept at Netflix, which is kind of like, oh, we'll make it easy for you to do things a certain way, and then you'll get a bunch of other advantages by doing things that way. And security is just one of those things that'll be super easy for you, and you'll kind of get a bunch of things out of the box if you kind of go down the paved road, and then just creating incentives for people to use the paved road. So what we do a lot of times is, some of the assessments we're doing or bug bounty submissions we get or vulnerabilities we're finding by both manual and automated scanning and stuff like that, using that to find classes of issues that we can try to address with paved road solutions and things like that.
Does that mindset come from like other departments and throughout Netflix? Because I did notice there seems to be that sort of so Seth, we were at AWS reInvent, right? In I don't know what year that was. What year was that?
It was like 2 years ago, so that would have been late 2016, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, the Netflix team was there, and Seth and I were like sitting there watching, blown away, because each solution was, there was a solution for everything. Like one was automatic revocation of AWS access keys based on usage, or maybe it was permissions. I might be getting that backwards. And I think we talked about it with Scott Piper when he was on. But then there was like, so if you are a developer and you want to have a site, you get an HTTPS certificate through one of these little
Lemur,
through Lemur, exactly.
There you go. Yep.
And then instead of doing the like command line SSL, it just, I guess what I'm saying is, and then that cert pushed immediately into the Elastic load balancers, and then you can use it. But I guess that seems like, from an outsider perspective, just something that all security teams seem to share. Is this like idea? I don't know how much true that is, but it seems like it.
No, I think that is definitely true. In general, for us, it comes from the fact that as security, we really don't try to be gatekeepers. Like there isn't really a concept of a sign-off, or there isn't really a concept of a security approval here. We have a very sort of freedom and responsibility culture where, as individuals, folks have a lot of freedom on doing what they need to do to get their job done and what the right thing for the business is. But that also comes with sort of the responsibility of taking the accountability of what you're doing. And then, so as security teams, our job is really to like communicate the context of the impact of something, right? As opposed to controlling what you can and cannot do. So we really, really focus on like to be able to, one, scale ourselves in an environment where things move so fast. It's really, really important for us to rely heavily on automation. And then two, it's really, really important for us to make the secure thing the easy thing to do, because otherwise we would never be able to get people to like adapt these things, right? Because of the speed at which they want to move. Our job is to really support them in, doing things securely at that same speed.
No, I was just going to say that's exactly what kind of this discussion that we were having. I mean, you talk about like the platform as a service and the security, make it easier to secure things. That was one thing that Jim was really big on last week when we talked about him was, hey, eventually we're going to get to this state where security is the natural state of an application, right? There's always going to be mistakes. I mean, we're always going to have a job to actually like help people and fix the code, but it's going to become a lot harder to find things like a cross-site scripting or a SQL injection. We're already seeing people create these tools. And that's one thing that I've been very impressed with coming out of Netflix for sure. I mean, you've got Lemur, you've got Security Monkey, you've got all this stuff that's been like pushed back to the community, and we don't see that from a ton of other organizations, right? Definitely, like your Googles and some of your bigger security teams do push a lot of that back as far as like open source tooling, but Netflix is definitely on the forefront of like the cloud side of things as people are pushing into that, and then just helping make that automation piece so much easier. I mean, and I think Scott's done the same thing. So, I mean, how involved are you on some of those projects then in creating those tools? Is it, how much of that is your daily job versus just, advising a development team?
So for the application security team, we definitely spend, I want to say, like 50-50 of our time between automation versus the partnership work that we call, which is sort of like being more embedded with a particular org or team. So we actually, even for some of the partnership work we do, we take a little bit of a different approach than most other places. So it's not like a per app threat model type of thing. We'll do sort of like a broader for the org, find, I don't know, like top 5 things you can do to move security forward, like for your organization, as opposed to, doing a per app threat model as much. And then the automation stuff is really more focused on inventorying like what's out there in our environment, or being able to run some vulnerability scanning and things like that on things that we find that are in our environment, and then being able to use that insight to find risky things that we should actually go and partner with. So really relying on our automation to be able to limit the number of people we have to interact with one-on-one, and then reducing that to things that are like big risk and big impact.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like that automation piece is obviously, huge, especially when you're talking the scale of Netflix. Like I can only imagine the number of EC2 instances that you guys have up at any given time. And I would be surprised if you could give me an exact number on how many that is. Just because of, the flow and how, the capacity and everything that I imagine goes into it. But along those lines, it really sounds like you're creating automated tools to do almost what we're styling nowadays as threat hunting or bug hunting from a security perspective. Is that how you view it?
So that's been definitely the case so far. Like we've definitely used the automation to do like as much sort of, finding the vulnerabilities and things like that through the automation. Now we're actually shifting focus and thinking about like evolving our AppSec program to more focus on using the automation to find, how off the paved road someone is. Because, some of the things we've seen in the past is like, oh, if you're actually on the paved road, a lot of things kind of go away in terms of security risk. So, a lot of, even if vulnerabilities exist, they're mitigated, or the risk is mitigated because of you being on the paved road. So we're thinking that there is a lot of value in also telling people when they're off the paved road and figuring out, what part of the paved road components they need to be adopting. So definitely like the vulnerability identification piece is one part of it, but we're actually beginning to invest more and more in like this visibility piece of how off the security paved path are you, and what security controls should you be adopting, and like trying to automate some of that. So that's kind of like the direction we're trying to improve in going forward.
When you talk about the paved path, because I noticed during your, and we'll actually, let me post the link to your AppSec, your AppSec California 2018 talk. Let me put that in chat here. But so some of the languages mentioned were Java, Python, Ruby, and JavaScript. And when you say paved path, are like, so like for automation, obviously, if it's static analysis, that often relies on it. I mean, that's pretty, language specific. So I didn't know if that's if that's one way you meant a paved road, like we recommend using these languages because we have support for them, or if it's, no, everybody just uses what's best for them, and we do primarily like, I don't know, dynamic testing, dependency scanning. I guess my question is, like for what you can tell us, how much does all that work?
Yeah, definitely. Like that's a small part of it, where it's like, oh, we have certain amount of coverage for things when they are in some languages. But then when I'm talking about some of the security behavior, I also mean things like, oh, easy app to app authentication, or easy to use authorization frameworks, or secure by default for, being able to use like secure communication or secure storage for like being able to use those services like that those are like the payload components when I talk about like security payload.
Okay, I understand. And I am fixing up this link, by the way, because it's actually broken for the video. There we go. Cool. I think I have the right. I hopefully have the right link right now. Yeah. So, because again, it's like automation is a tough thing to like handle, and I don't know. So, I mean, if I could ask, do you do any like sort of dependency scanning, or is it, like, just anything you could tell us about your basically, how you would approach automation, even if it's at a high level and with nothing specific?
Yeah, definitely. So, for example, we picked like the few languages that are common in our ecosystem, and then being able to do sort of continuous like repo scanning for using maybe more I think we've had more success with sort of like smart code grep stuff as opposed to actual static analysis. So like that stuff has worked better for us, and then we have sort of like reviewing those findings is sort of part of our on-call process. So, we kind of like continuously are scanning repositories for like source code scanning stuff in those languages that we care about the most, and then reviewing those findings and actually like filing tickets against like what is actually a bug from that, and that is sort of integrated into our on-call process, or doing say dynamic scanning on new externally available domains that are popping up in our ecosystem. So if someone like stood up a site for doing like a marketing for a new original or something like that, then making sure that we're doing sort of like the low-hanging fruit testing for that site with say dynamic app scanning and stuff like that, or we like doing looking for sequencing code and making sure that that's not ending up. So being able to have really a lot of it is about building the visibility, and the automation is really focused on being able to build that visibility and like use that for things like this.
And so if like for at GitHub, we have pretty similar process, as a matter of fact, but like it's no secret that we're operating on primarily right now monolith, right? But as far as I understand with Netflix, and I guess where I'm going with this is with Netflix, I'd imagine you have plenty of repos that need to be continuously scanned. Yeah. And I'm always curious how folks go about getting, like in terms of asset inventory and just getting a grip on what needs to be, like what needs to be plugged into and what needs to be reviewed. Is it we rely on a process where developers come to us, or something else, maybe more automated? I mean, I don't.
Yeah, so we have a pretty like I don't know if you guys are familiar with Spinnaker. So Spinnaker is open source, but it's basically like our CI/CD product that it's part of the infrastructure paved road for releasing things here at Netflix. So we really rely heavily on developer productivity to get that insight, because again, like we may be missing some things here and there because of that. Because if you're not releasing through the paved road, then we may not know about you. But then it's like if you're releasing through the paved road, we sort of hook into the like the continuous integration paved road to be able to find out about things. So really rely heavily on like our dev insights and our productivity tooling for that stuff, and it helps us a lot that we are able to sort of hitch the security wagon to the developer productivity wagon, because that's a strong story today for us.
So most of the code is then pushing through Spinnaker, and that's the easier way to actually identify it. I like both of you, right? Like just exactly what Jim said last week is you're kind of in this like special, wonderful state when it comes to application security. And that's what I'm trying to talk to outside of that, is that Like I go into a lot of organizations, and I mean, if they have a handle on all the code from their organization that's in GitHub, right, or in Git, they are doing well. And so my question to you is, when like all of your identification of this code then runs through the CI/CD pipeline, and that's because you've made that the easiest path to promote something into production. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think that definitely helps, and I agree with you that doing security in sort of like the cloud environment is definitely the easy mode, right? Because you can rely on all of these like cloud primitives and like the cloud infrastructure stuff to be able to answer some of these questions, and it becomes a lot harder in a more traditional environment.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone to the case at times where it's almost like you push everyone through a proxy and make them accept your SSL certificate, so then you can sniff out exactly where they're going and where they're pushing code to, right? I mean, because there isn't identification for a lot of that, especially when you talk about older organizations like big banks and things like that. I started my career at a bank here in Utah, and man, that code was everywhere. I mean, if you remember the old like CVS and SVN days, and it was just awful. And there was no way to actually get half of it right. We had old COBOL code that there was no code that existed. All they had was the binary. So to patch it, they would go in and patch the binary that was running on the mainframe. Try to do a security review on that, right? It was just this massive, massive problem. But so, I mean, like, what suggestions that would you have for someone that's not in your environment to push them that direction?
I think the thing that has helped us, like obviously, like we still, I'm sure, like in our environment, have things that we may not know about because they're not on the paved road. But instead of it being the stick of like you have to get to the paved road, make it more of a carrot where it's like, oh, you get all of this telemetry and all of this other stuff for free if you're doing the paved road solution, or you don't have to figure out how to like manage your AWS instances. Spinnaker will do all of that for you, and it's going to be like abstracted away for you to be able to do this stuff easily, right? So it's the thing where it's like making sort of the standard ways the easier ways, as opposed to the you have to do it probably works better, because in that case, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
no, that's really good advice. Just like spend your cycles rather than checking that a weird compliance box. But if you've got the cycles to build out a framework or a monolith or whatever, like an application framework that everyone can use that already has the security stuff built into it and makes it easier for them to deploy, I think that developers will naturally migrate that direction. I mean, Ken, what do you guys do at GitHub? Sorry, we're like bouncing around, but.
Oh no, yeah. Well, and to go back to, and just to step back for a second, like I think when Seth and Jim were talking about it kind of being like almost a utopia in terms of application security, I think what they're pointing to is like I guess culture, funding, because funding obviously so culture and funding I think are probably pretty important. Obviously, you need to have the funding for a team and for the activities that you're going to do, and the software you need to get, whatever the case is. If you need to build it, you need the time for it. And then the other piece being like culture, which a lot of what you've talked about tonight to me falls pretty easily within that culture bucket, right? Like it's making things low friction. It's making it sort of just easy for developers to build something that is well developed / secure, because secure, being well developed is being secure. So I think that that's what they sort of mean. And Seth, I'm sorry, what was your question before I go off and ask another set of questions?
Oh, I don't even remember now.
Because I have a whole set of questions, but yeah.
It had to do with like offering the carrot or offering like a like the paved road that Asta's talking about. Like, do you have something at GitHub that you offer your developers along those same lines, right? Frameworks and other things that already have security built in, that's the direction that they go naturally? Or is it more of a, stick, like Asta is saying, that they can't release to production until something is secure or signed off on?
It's actually none of those things. It's kind of a weird, like for us, it's weird because it's weird. I say weird, it's unusual. That's why I'm calling it weird. It's not like crazy. It's unusual. And it's that typically developers want to come to us for a second set of eyes because they don't want to put something out there that's going to be insecure. And, while we do have the monolith, just like you, Asta, in your group, we've got other apps that power the business. And, like nobody wants to be the one that puts out code that causes a breach. Right. So,
yeah.
I mean, there are some processes, like if you want to, go external, sure, security is a part of that. But from what I've experienced, it's just more they want that second set of eyes. So I don't know. It's like
so again, it's a utopia where the developers come to you, or you have all the tools and money that you need to secure. Yeah, okay, I got it.
I'll say this: it is known within the engineering teams. Like if you're going to put a new app online, or if you're going to do a major feature request, you should open a review. The other thing is to kind of speak to what Asta is saying. Like there is a scanning mechanism that you can plug into your repo, and often people want that just for that like second set of eyes, that like automated test coverage, basically. Because if there's one thing I think we all on this call or in this podcast realize, it's like developers do love automated tests.
Yeah, and we don't do enough support of that generally from the community, right? Like that was one of my talks that I had previously, right? Talking about security unit tests. And it sounds like that's a lot of what the automation piece is, Asta, that you're doing at Netflix is.
No, actually, for us, really, like a lot of the automation, what we're trying to do is like, how can we make it more and more transparent to the developers? We actually haven't explored as much of the, kind of like making it embedded where they can write the test themselves and that sort of stuff. We have wanted to invest in that area, but we haven't been able to yet. Because it's like, in general, we are definitely always very cautious about when we're asking for the developer's time and, increasing the cognitive load on the developer. And I think that's like a very unique way of thinking about it here is the, how much can we do where it can be transparent to them, or it can be easy and where they don't have to think about security too much and it sort of just happens. So we're more in that mode, but I definitely want to explore sort of like the automation tests coverage stuff being a part of, their testing and all of that. Like we haven't really leaned into that as much.
Okay. No, it's definitely kind of a new and emerging area, right? Since I've talked about it, I've seen a couple other talks that have popped up at, B-sides and other places about like developers that are coming from the QA side that are talking more about introducing payloads and security payloads into the test frameworks rather than trusting in some of the dynamic tests that we have a tendency to rely on, right? Now, Ken, I know you had some other questions, so I'm going to let you jump in before I, spin off on that direction.
Yeah, no, actually, before I get to, because one of the questions I plan on asking, because anybody who leads a program, it's always helpful because we've actually got a few people, one who just asked a question, which I'll get to, but we have a few listeners who they're regularly on and they're actively trying to build AppSec programs, and they're trying to get to the point that you're at, right? And so like, one of the questions I'll end up asking is, like if you were to give advice for like a 30 or 60-day kind of program, like what to focus on to get going, that would be something. But before we get to that, question was, so with an org of your size, with a large number of apps, how do you track the status of past, current, and future security efforts? Now, I'm not sure if security efforts means like we want to do training or we want to do like a full-on review or something like that. But, I guess it's open to a little bit of interpretation there.
I see. Yeah. So I think in terms of like security efforts, there can be multiple things, right? So in terms of like the automation, we're trying to kind of like measure coverage on, okay, these are the repos we're scanning. And these are the repos we're not scanning, sort of thing. Or, this falls under languages where we do have automated scanning for. So measuring sort of like if this is externally accessible, then we are running. So think about it as like the different capabilities you have, and then, different parts of your ecosystem, what are the capabilities that are deployed in that part of the ecosystem. And then the partnership being sort of like the most white glove, which we do for the minimal set of people, right? So if you're doing something really so let's say if you're an infrastructure team, anything you do security related is going to have a big downstream impact, right? So it is high impact for us to work with you. So we would sort of prioritize the partnership work for those areas. Or if we will see, say, like bug bounty bugs from a certain thing, for a certain app, kind of like ongoing, we'll see that, there's a larger problem here. Let's go work with them and like figure it out. That'll be something that'll like ramp up and ramp down. So I think that white glove piece is the only one where it's sort of more ad hoc, but we're trying to think of how can we actually like track that and measure that more. But for the automation stuff, like I think our, in general, security metrics is a hard thing. And that's a thing we're working on, like how can we measure that better? But that's the approach we're taking is, what coverage do we have for what capabilities we provide on different parts of the ecosystem.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think for us, we use like project boards and like GitHub issues and things like that. Obviously, it's all like GitHub focused, right?
Yeah.
We have to dog food that, but yeah, like that's interesting. So on that note, one of the things I wanted to ask you was with regards to bug bounty, since you brought it up. With bug bounty, okay, so we've had a few different like views on this, but it seems like, so both Seth and I are I'm sure you're part of a few different Slack channels. I think we all are at this point. We all have too much Slack, but it always comes up, at least pretty often. Hey, bug bounty versus paying for an assessment. And like there's kind of a few schools of thought there. One's like, it isn't like, one or the other. It's they do different things and they're good for augmenting. The other is like, yes, bug bounty is fine and assessments cover compliance. And another one is totally the opposite, which is like bug bounty is just, I don't feel like this is something Netflix or GitHub or any kind of like company like that falls under, because I think that the programs are pretty visible and they have a lot of people contributing. But certainly like smaller companies, I've seen this where they're like, oh, bug bounty is garbage. We only get garbage submissions. It eats up a lot of our time. It doesn't help, etc. So how has the bug bounty from your perspective been for you? I mean, has that been a positive influence? Obviously you're still doing it, so.
Yeah, no, yeah, for us, definitely, like we ran a private program for a good 18 months before we went public. And we were, definitely receiving a lot of things that were helping us find focus areas or find, kind of systemic issues in some places, or even just get coverage on some sort of external internet-facing applications and things like that. So it's been useful for us, definitely, from that standpoint. When you go from private to public, definitely, the signal to noise ratio changes. That's just something you go in with eyes wide open, understanding that. But I think the program has continued to be useful for us. I'm not 100% sort of sold on sort of the incremental advantage of going from private to public, though. Just because I think it has sort of opened up, like, more people in the world are able to submit things to our program, which is great. So I think that's definitely useful. But like in terms of sort of like the volume of bugs and things like that, I feel like you definitely have to keep doing, things to keep people engaged. Maybe sort of like, more focused, like researcher engagement is definitely something you have to pay attention to ongoing, even though if you have a public program, it definitely does not self-sustain. And to the question of, one or the other, I'm definitely in the first group, which is sort of like they augment each other. It's definitely not a one or the other. It's different coverage you're getting from both of those things.
And what is the difference between, for those who aren't familiar, what is the difference between a private and a public bug bounty program through, and I believe this is through BugCrowd?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the private program basically just means that, we invited like top whatever number of researchers from the platform to participate in the program. So in that case, instead of just accepting reports from like anybody on the face of the planet, you're just inviting researchers that have submitted good bugs to other programs, and that sort of gives you some sort of like screening process, if you may, for who's submitting to your program. But we ran a responsible disclosure program through our just main website that people could still submit bugs to us. So we wanted to standardize all of that through our bug bounty. So a private program is basically invite only, and then a public program is anybody can submit a bug to it.
The invite only sounds like a good proposition. I mean, with us, like we get the same, like I don't know how much I'm supposed to say, but well, I will say
all of it. Let's say all of it.
I think it wouldn't hurt to say that exactly. For us, like when for the, actually, you know what? No, I can say this because it's actually the metrics are there on our bug bounty page. We have write-ups of the findings, but what I've noticed in the, what I've been there for almost a year, so actually in less than a few weeks, a year, is that for the really good or really high impact and sort of complex submissions, it's typically the same group of people, at least from what I've noticed, within a certain time range. Like I have noticed on the bug bounty that we've posted that there are people that I've hadn't seen submit, obviously, since I've been there, but they were submitting before I came on. But yeah, I mean, I could totally see how that just limiting that to a certain specific set of people is beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. You will always have the top researchers in your program that are just, either one, they understand your ecosystem, so it's worth their time to invest more time. So really, like, as the company who wants more researcher engagement, it's your job to figure out, like, how can you kind of create that incentive for more and more researchers to come participate in your program?
That's a good point to make, especially to those people that are building new programs, right? I definitely see like both of you are saying, that there is the both sides to the coin. There's the assessments that you pay for that are very scoped in nature, right? It's, I want you to take a code review and I want you to do a dynamic assessment or whatever on this small piece of our infrastructure or our code. Whereas the bug bounty widens that view. It gives more of a, this is how the application acts overall within our infrastructure. So there may be other bugs that pop up because of the interactions that it has with other pieces of our code. So there's two different ways to identify bugs and to quash those threats that come out of it. But for those people that are creating a program, it's the thing that I'm taking out of what both of you are saying is that there has to be somewhat culture, right? You have to maintain your relationships, and you have to keep building you have to maintain the relationships with those researchers in order to keep those bugs coming along. Otherwise, they just stop. Is that what you've seen in the past, Astha?
Yeah, they do get to a point of diminishing return, right? Like, if they will find a new application, they'll be able to sort of, hammer on it, find a standard set of bugs that they look for everywhere. But it's like, as applications get better, like from the researcher standpoint, maybe you can, give them more information or give them sort of like more targeted things for what you want them to test and things like that. Unless you do that, it's not worth their time to keep investing in your app that they've already spent a certain amount of time on, right?
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, that's what I've always struggled with in the bug bounties that I've participated in, is the time to payout ratio, right? It's much easier for me as an established, application security person to go run an assessment for a company and actually get the scope and do everything like I've done in the past. Whereas if I'm just like poking in at Netflix, say, for 2 hours, there's no guarantee that I'm going to find anything because I don't know it, right? I have to invest a certain amount of time. And then I'm also competing with those people that have already invested that time when anything new pops up. Right. Mm-hmm. So there are barriers to entry, I think, on both of those sides. But it's interesting that you do have to maintain that relationship, that you do have to provide at least more information or other incentives to keep them coming back. Otherwise, they disappear. Mm-hmm. How many of those researchers would you say are ones that have been in the private bounty that moved to the public bounty and are still around, is that a large number, or have you seen a shift in the valid bug reports or the big bug reports changing from the public or the private researchers to the public researchers?
No, I'll definitely say that it's like, the researchers that had been active in our program have mostly, like, I don't think going public has affected them being engaged in the program at all. But definitely the signal to noise ratio has changed in terms of like the amount of bugs that we receive and how many of that is valid.
How many people submit, there's no HTTP only on this cookie? That's
yeah, no amount of writing a clear scope document can change that.
Yeah. Come on, I see all those, like, these are all out of scope on every single bug bounty that I'm in, and I know they still get those. I know that people still submit them. So it's the cost of running a program. So how many people do you have that are dedicated to running the bug bounty program?
So we don't really have sort of like dedicated people running bug bounty program. It's sort of like the part of our on-call and interrupt budget for the team. We do use triage services from our bug bounty platform to sort of do the first level triage.
Yeah, and I think most of those, the big companies utilize the triage, right, from BugCrowd or HackerOne or whoever, to make sure that the bugs that get passed to you are at least valid, right, or at least have been checked. So
yeah. So that helps a lot. Yeah.
And I know Jason would talk about that too. Jason Haddix, we've had him on as well. About how that all works, and at some point it may be interesting to talk to him some more about that. Well, good.
I was going to ask if it's okay, Seth. I was going to ask you how you cultivate a good relationship with these researchers, like, because we've talked a lot about culture with developers, but I think there's certainly an aspect of cultivating relationship with researchers for bug bounties. Like, what's your approach there?
Yeah, I think one of the things actually like that we, sort of context sharing is like a big tenet here at Netflix. So we actually bring that in our interactions with the researcher community as well. So really one reason for us to run the private program for a long time was also to be able to sort of smooth out all the kinks and make it so that researchers would have a good experience playing in our program. So some of the things being, for example, if we're saying a certain bug is a certain impact, providing as much context as possible on how we got to that. Like here's kind of like all the background on how we got to a certain decision on something being out of scope or something being, a lower impact or something like that. So even when we're receiving bugs that may not be valid, we do a lot of sort of, feedback and training for our triage engineers to make sure that, there's a certain tone and certain kind of like context sharing that's happening when they're communicating with researchers on the Netflix program, or, working really closely with researchers if they've had cases where they want to do, coordinated disclosure for things, if they found something on the Netflix product, or, just being kind of like very diligent about, providing updates and things like that to researchers. And really like just communication and context sharing, I think goes a long way.
So kind of like to give people more context on that, so would an example of that be like, hey, you're marking this as a duplicate Y, and then you would maybe say, oh, this is a known issue, or like that we found internally and are working on it, or something along those lines?
Yeah, that, or for example, say you submitted something and then that's, like a risk accepted or something like that on our end, we would give them enough context on, here are the mitigating controls we have in place that make it okay for us to accept that risk here. Or, like, I don't think it's a P1, but a P2 because of these reasons.
Yeah. And, like one thing, it's funny because like, when you give that context, it's kind of nice because you almost like you kind of can weed out the how do I say this nicely? The people you don't want to interact with, you pretty much, because the people that are like you want to work with, they'll pretty quickly be like, okay, oh, that's reasonable, that makes sense, or hey, maybe if I disagree, but like overall I get it. And then there's the people that are just like, yeah, they're like, and it's almost kind of good because you're like, okay, I found the crazy person. I mean, that's not the nicest way to say it, but the person that's just gonna go off on tangents, and it's not rational and won't take what you're, and in any program you're gonna have like that's open to the world, you're gonna have that kind of stuff. But I mean, for us it's pretty few and far between, but
yeah, most researchers come in with good intent, I think, and it's like if you're trying to if you treat them that way, and if you sort of make sure that they're understanding where you're coming from, as human beings, most people are pretty reasonable, like who'd know.
Yeah, and that's what we found. Most are. It's just once in a great while you get that person that you're like, okay, all right, we've been tried to be reasonable, and like that. Yeah, so definitely happens. But cool. Yeah. So looping back to the original, like if I'm coming into an organization, there's obviously a lot of things that you can do between like asset inventory, or you could focus on training, or you could focus on, assessments, or whatever the case is. Like if you're coming in and you're starting a program from the ground floor, what's sort of your like holistic approach to getting an AppSec program off the ground?
Yeah, I'll definitely say like asset inventory is pretty important. I will say it's definitely among like the top 3 of things you should think about. I wasn't here when this program was started, but I've heard from folks that were here in terms of just sort of like, building those relationships and socializing yourself as a resource that's available is really important. So, just going and, letting people know that you're here and here are the services you can provide for them, so they know to reach out to you when they have something that like smells funny to them. Yeah. And then I think what will happen is, if you're sort of trying to bootstrap a AppSec program, a lot of times what will happen is you'll just come up with basic platform security services that should be available to avoid a lot of these bugs. Like investing in building out those things will definitely be very, very like useful if you get that sort of out of the way early on, because then you're not just the person pointing out at problems. You actually have solutions that you can send people to solve those problems. So, like having authentication frameworks, or, ways to store secrets securely and all of that sort of stuff, like having your story together on those sort of building blocks of security is definitely very useful.
So getting a grip on what's all in development, or been developed rather, or both, building relationships with developers. I'd imagine at some point too, because I've never had to, well, actually, that's not true. Once I did, but like one thing I'm always curious about is, and especially recently, because this has come up with other people, is like, how do you, I mean, this isn't something you specifically have to answer. I'm just trying to think of like a way to make the case for more resources, right? Like when you're one person, it's crazy to me that, because and by the way, in the couple cases I'm talking about, these are companies that they're like entirely an online presence, and there's one AppSec person. And so when you talk about relationships, it starts to make me think about like making relationships with the folks that can help you, like with your boss and other departments, and kind of give you that justification for, or not justification, but the the go ahead to hire more people.
I will definitely say like you should probably walk into an organization that, like, if you really want to do security work, you should probably walk into an organization that's bought into sort of like why they need security. It's, I don't know, like I personally think that it's a losing battle where if you go in and like nobody understands why they hired you, or like why they may need more security people.
Well, no, we've had actually that echoes almost exactly a statement I know I've made on this podcast before. And Seth and I forget who we were talking to, but we're like, if you don't, it's kind of weird, because if you it's what you said. There's so many there are so many good places to work that are bought into security. And this is like, especially in application security, it's not exactly a field where there's a ton of people doing it. And so I guess what I'm saying is like, there are options there. So it does always feel weird, but there are those edge cases where people are like, no, I like the company and the people are good. It's just, they don't put their money into AppSec. They put their money into, traditional network related security. They put their money into, GRC being a bigger slice of the pie for whatever reason. And so it's just something that's been going through my mind. But yeah,
are you sort of
building.
talking about like demonstrating value of the AppSec program? Is that what you're getting at?
I'm not sure what the answer is. I guess because you said relationship building, so maybe just think of like maybe building enough relationships to convince people to let you hire. I have no idea.
So that everyone's like, I need help from the AppSec team. Please let them hire more people.
Yeah, kind of.
But that is the case, right? I mean, we had Justin on a couple weeks ago, who's actually building out a program for a small startup, right? And that's exactly what he's trying to do. I mean, we talked about, identifying developers that are interested in security, number one, right? That become their security champions. But until those people have been identified, it's a slog, right? To figure out, where should I spend my time so that I affect some sort of change? I'm useful to the organization, but my boss still thinks I'm doing something effective, and then the organization, and like it's a fine line to walk. I know, he seems to be doing okay over where he's at. We'll have him on again, but it's like that's the kind of advice that I don't necessarily want to push somebody like him into saying, hey, guess what? You should just go find another job, right? Because they've obviously hired him. They've got a couple security people, and somebody has to bootstrap it, right? So why not have it be someone that's passionate about application security? So, but from what you're saying, you're saying that just so that I make sure that I'm getting it right. The first thing is that we identify the assets, and then start building those relationships. Is that correct?
Definitely. And also, I'm not saying that like don't go work somewhere where they don't have a ton of money to do security stuff. Like that's not what I'm getting at.
That's canon, the GitHub utopia. So just
kind of is. Yeah. It wasn't about money either. It was more of what Astha was saying, which is like you, I guess, because yes, there are situations where I mean, joking aside, I can't just be like, oh, go get another job because they want to work there. But believe me, my first go-to is get another job, like go somewhere where they've already bought into security. Like you don't want to do that uphill battle, or have to go with that uphill battle. So
at the end of the day, our job is to reduce risk for the business, right? So it's like if the business is at a point where they can't afford to have that much risk and they only need one security person to reduce a minuscule amount of risk, then maybe that's the right call for where they are today, right? So you probably at that point walk in and say, okay, here are the things that matter the most. Like if you only have one person, you should focus on just these things. And that you just prioritize and you say, that's all we're going to be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's realistic about setting expectations. This is what I'm going to be able to accomplish when I only have one person. I have 40 hours a week, right, to actually move through this. And I'm supporting 150 developers. Right? There's only so much that you can get to. I always talk about doing some sort of a threat model or a risk analysis of the company itself as well, right? Hey, Netflix, the amount of, targets that are on your back are just huge. But some small startup, realistically, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to spend, thousands and thousands of dollars on an application security program when they haven't figured out how to manage. Wow, we've got two Astas.
Sorry,
no, you're fine. But it doesn't make sense to push application security over everything else when maybe they're a loan processor and they need more like financial controls. So I think that's where what you're getting at is the business itself has to make the case or has to be supportive of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, no, I've Yeah, and by the way, no worries. We can hear you. We just can't see you, so don't stress that at all. Yeah, there's somebody in mind I was just thinking about that I'd like to have on the show to kind of talk about that whole thing. So that's just a mental note that I need to make. But yeah, no, and actually, by the way, like if you have a if you have a manager that's what you said, Asta, if you have a manager like that says that, like, we need to manage expectations, that's a good manager to work for. And the reason I say that is so we did this bug bounty event in HackerOne event in Vegas. And we were on the rooftop after the event, talking about some of the things that make the program successful. And I was telling my manager, who I consider to be an amazing manager, Greg Osa, to me as having been an outsider coming in, I think the most important thing that I noticed was setting expectations. Like, here, we can't review every line of code. Here's what we can do, and being very specific. And that prevents a lot of things. That prevents burnout. That prevents prioritizing things that shouldn't be a priority. But it also gives a good, here's realistically the amount of people that we need to hire given what you want, which is what you're saying. And like I said, if you hear a manager talk like that, like, that's a good manager. You should want to work for them. So
sounds good. I can use this in my recruiting pitch.
There you go. So, well, we hit an hour. See, it went by really quick.
Yeah, you were right. I was definitely like, 1 hour sounds like a long time, but
yeah, it does. But it's because we're so engaging, right? That's
no, it's easy, right? We just ask you questions about you, and you should be able to answer them. So
yeah, hopefully it's not too stressful. We've had a couple people on that they get stressed out about it, but you've been great to talk to.
Yeah, thank you. And since we're coming to about the close of the show, one thing we always like to, because first of all, you're helping to organize the OWASP AppSec USA. You're one of the organizers of OWASP AppSec USA, which is, for those who don't know, it's in San Jose, October, I think the week 8th through 12th, I want to say.
That's right.
And the training is on the first 2 days of that week, and then the conference is the remaining portion of the week.
Yes. The conference is 11/12.
Yeah. 11/12. Conference is Thursday, Friday. Trainings run Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There's some 2 and some 3-day, right?
Awesome. So, like, anything that you would like to mention to people about OWASP AppSec USA coming up?
Yeah, so definitely I did want to mention, like, this year, the focus for the program for AppSec USA is security through enablement. So a lot of it is around, like, how do we make it easy for developers to do security, and how do we build things that make it easy for developers to build secure products, as opposed to, oh, I found this one thing that's really terrible, so haha. So it's actually kind of like caters to both security engineers as well as developers that are interested in security. So if you don't already have a ticket, I would encourage you to go buy one and come attend the conference, and then check out Seth's training as well. So that sounds really cool. So yeah, I hope to see a lot of listeners of this podcast at the conference. Come say hi.
Awesome.
Yeah, come say hi to Asta. Come say hi to us as well. Ken and I will be there at least, the training days and during the conference, right? So we'll be around. We'll have stickers, right, Ken?
Yeah, we'll have stickers. I brought them to DEF CON, and then we never had time to I didn't have time to pass them out because I was only there for like 48 hours and just doing the event and left.
Yeah.
So,
but otherwise, I mean, Asta, it's great to have you, like, actually organizing the conference and helping out with that. We know that's a huge effort, especially with a nationwide conference like that. The way that OWASP does that and passes it around to different local OWASP chapters, it's not necessarily an easy thing. So kudos for putting that on, and let us know if there's anything else that we can do to help promote that, or help once we get down there to make sure the event comes off well.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Are you speaking anywhere that you would like us to mention?
Yes, I'll be speaking later this year at Swiss Cyberstorm at the end of October for anyone that's in the EU or is going to be in Switzerland for that. So definitely check that out if you're going to be around for that.
I'll paste the link because I actually have the link for that up, and I'll paste it in chat so people can. Where? Oh, it's in.
Bern.
What side of Switzerland is that? Now, sorry, I'm now like looking at maps to see where in Switzerland. I was there a year and a half ago, and it was on the west side of Switzerland. It was pretty nice, pretty amazing. Let's see. That's going to be a fun trip for you.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Let's see. Oh, I lost the chat. Sorry.
But
yeah, put it in there.
Yeah, before we let you go, any last minute thoughts on, or advice for people on, building a program or, starting out in the industry? Right? Any last minute thoughts?
I think one of the things that's great about our community is there's all of these people solving the exact same problems at all the different places. So just please go talk to folks. I think that's the biggest thing. There's so much to learn from the community.
Cool. Good. Well, yeah, thanks once again, right? It's always great to have, people on that I've interacted with in the past that we finally make some connections, and it'll be good to see you in San Jose in a month or so. Ken, did you have any other final thoughts that you wanted to talk through?
No, just well, I guess I was going to mention. So I'll be speaking you're going to be doing a workshop in Cactus Con in September. I'll be speaking at Cactus Con with Chris Gates, Carnal Otage on Twitter, talking about hacking AWS stuff. I finally booked my travel. I know you're about to book your travel for AppSec Day in Melbourne, Australia. And then you already mentioned AppSec USA. So those are the things that we got going on. And I swear at some point we will come up with some T-shirts and figure that out. But yeah. Not right now. Soon. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. Thanks again, Astha. Don't jump off. Stay on for a minute after we stop the broadcast. Thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you next week. Ken, who's our guest next week?
I think Matt Tesaro, I want to say. Let me see here. It's a good question. Yes, it's Matt Tesaro from OWASP.
Matt's another OWASP, great OWASP. I think he's on the board right now, so that should be another interesting one, and we can talk to him about AppSec USA even more.
Cool.
Awesome.
I'm waving, guys.
Your avatar is waving. Yes. Thanks, Astha.
All right. Thanks again. Have a good night.